This is the Year 3 training looking at what greater depth looks like at the end of Year 3, linked to my exemplification of writing standards in Year 3. I'm going to begin by looking at the expectations for greater depth at the end of Year 2. As I said in my video last week, I do see Year 3 as an opportunity to consolidate Key Stage 1 skills. So if you had a child who came out of Year 2 at greater depth, then this is what their writing will look like. You've got 6 statements for greater depth at the end of Year 2. The bottom 4 are around the technical elements. Correct use of punctuation, that is not just full stops, capital letters, question marks and exclamation marks, but also commas in a list and apostrophes for contraction and possession. Correct spelling of words learnt so far to the end of Year 2, words with suffixes in them spelt correctly, and their handwriting needs to have the strokes needed to join some letters, but does not necessarily have to be joined. So the technical elements have to be absolutely spot on, but a child can't be working at greater depth by just meeting those last 4 statements. It's the top 2 that are key. So looking at the first one, if you remember last week, we looked at the word coherent in the first statement for working at the expected standard. And we talked about that, meaning to be able to demarcate most sentences accurately with capital letters and full stops, to use present and past tense mostly correctly, to use coordination and subordination, to use expanded noun phrases, and to use a range of sentence types. Well, a child who's working at greater depth still needs that, but also needs to be able to write effectively. You will know the children in your class who are aiming for greater depth or who have the potential to be greater depth, because their writing exhibits elements that other children's writing doesn't. They have flair. You read it and you think, wow, that was fantastic. They are usually good readers. Well, they always have to be good readers, actually. And they always have to enjoy the reading, because that's what they use to produce this really excellent writing. And that is mentioned in this first statement, that the children naturally draw on their reading, not only to inform the vocabulary and grammar of the writing, but also to inform the characters, their plots, their settings. They take chunks out, things that they've read or heard. They use their own experience. And they also use vocabulary and grammar from other year groups that you wouldn't necessarily teach them, and you don't have to teach them that to be greater depth, but they will naturally use it in their writing because they've seen it in the reading and they understand it. They have a really good understanding of what writing is all about, and a really good understanding of audience and purpose. The curriculum at the moment is very much around getting as many children as possible to mastery, which is age related, but there has to be something for those children who are gifted, and that's what greater depth is. Your top writers in your class might be better than the rest, but they're not necessarily greater depth. So it's worth thinking about what do they have from Year 2 greater depth, and how is that translated into the Year 3 curriculum, which we'll look at shortly. The second statement is also key to greater depth, making simple additions, revisions and proofreading corrections to their own writing. The Standards and Testing Agency did some research last year and found that many Year 2 teachers were thinking that proofreading is enough, looking for mistakes in the writing to do with spelling, punctuation, maybe having missed a word out, the wrong tense, proofreading around coherence. But editing the writing is not just about proofreading, it's about this as well. Reading the writing through and making additions and revisions that will support the reader with engaging with the writing more. And children who are working at greater depth really do have this down to a fine art. They can read a piece of writing through and they can sense whether it's effective or not, whether it will be effective for the reader, and they can make those additions and revisions to make it more effective. So how does this translate to the Year 3 curriculum? I've put together a document around what greater depth looks like in every year group. You'll find this in this Year 3 section of my website to refer to. So what I did was I typed up the curriculum and then I put in red what greater depth would look like within the Year 3 curriculum. It's not about moving into Year 4, 5, 6. It's about broadening within the curriculum. And you'll see a lot of the same words used: sparingly, appropriately, accurately, precisely, range of. It's about using everything well. And the first element actually is from Year 2, and that's about using adjectives well. Expanded noun phrases really do add detail for the reader, but it's about using them correctly, isn't it? Not 2 or 3 in front of every noun, not even 1 in front of every noun, but about using a range of precise adjectives and telling the reader something they don't know and not saying the same thing over and over again. So that's really something you can work on with Year 3 children. They do begin to punctuate dialogue in Year 3. Now, once your higher ability children have mastered that, then you can go on to thinking about about using dialogue well, using it sparingly, so that it adds detail to the writing and it isn't just a whole page of dialogue between 2 characters and rambling on. At the end of Year 6, children need to be able to use dialogue to show character and to move action on. So that would be something that you could work on with your Year 3 children. From Year 2, they bring up their coordinating, subordinating conjunctions that we talked about last week, and they build on to those. So for those higher ability children, it's about using a range and using them well, maybe sometimes using a couple within a sentence, so the writing really flows. Then we've got verb forms, so using a range of them accurately, including the present perfect, which again will support the writing with developing fluency. So it's about using a range of well-punctuated statements, questions, exclamation, commands and noun phrases with subordinating conjunctions, coordinating conjunctions, adverbs and prepositions, using them accurately and sparingly to produce an effective piece of writing which engages the reader. And just a couple more things. Obviously, the punctuation should be spot on, and that includes using a capital letter for names of people, places, days of the week and the personal pronoun I. And children, as I said before, taking from their reading and putting into their writing independently, not as being as reliant on your WAGL or your success criteria. Pull away from that with the children, maybe give them some different tasks with different slants so that they can really show what they can do. Sometimes giving higher ability children too much support in the way of WAGLs and success criteria can actually hinder the writing. So all of that I've just gone through is illustrated there on my Year 3 writing assessment grid.